Chair, now live.
Thank you, Sally. Well, welcome everyone to this evening's meeting of the Waste Management Scrutiny Panel. I'd just like to let you know that this virtual meeting is being live streamed. It will also be recorded and the recording subsequently made available via the Council's website. In addition, under the Openness of Local Government Bodies Regulations 2014, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or recordings is not under the Council's control. Please note that members of the public viewing the meeting via the live stream can only see the person who is speaking. Also, that it takes a second or so for Zoom to switch view to that person once they begin. Participants should please ensure that their microphone is muted when they are not speaking. So if I can just confirm who's present from the members of the panel. So if you could verbally confirm when I call your name that you can see and hear the proceedings, please. So we should have Councillor Baldwin.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. Councillor Forrest.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can both see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. Councillor Howe.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear the meeting.
Councillor Needham.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear the meeting.
Okay, and I'm not sure if Councillor Parton has joined yet. No, he hasn't. Okay. Could I also ask each of the officers present to confirm that they're present and they can see and hear the proceedings? So we should have Matt Bradford, Head of Cleansing and Open Spaces.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear proceedings.
Thank you, Matt. Sally Watson from Democratic Services Team.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. And Laura Strong from the Democratic Services Team.
Thank you, Chair. I can see and hear proceedings.
Thank you. Okay, so going on to item 1 on the agenda then, apologies. Have we received any apologies?
No apologies, Chair. Just to add, sorry, I should have mentioned when I said I could see and hear that Councillor Harper-Davies is also present as Cabinet Lead Member.
Yes, she is. Councillor Harper-Davies, can you see and hear the proceedings?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I can see and hear the proceedings.
Thank you. Okay, so no apologies received. Hopefully Councillor Parton will join us shortly. Item number 2 is disclosures of pecuniary and personal interests. Do any members have any to disclose? I don't see any hands raised. Okay. Item number 3 is declarations of the party whip. Do any members present have any declarations to declare? No? Okay. Then item 4 is the approval of the minutes from the previous meeting, which was held on the 9th of November. Does anybody have any matters arising from the minutes of the previous meeting? No? Is everyone happy to approve those minutes? Sally, do we need a proposer and a seconder?
Chair, it's fine if you could. It's fine to do with the consent of the meeting, the panel minutes, if that's okay with you.
Okay, yeah, that's fine if that's okay with all the other members. If nobody has any objections or any matters arising, then we'll agree the minutes of the last meeting. Okay. Item number 5 is questions under Scrutiny Committee Procedure 11.16. Do we have any questions?
No, there are no questions submitted, Chair.
Okay, no questions submitted. So then item number 6 on the agenda is local authorities considered to be leaders in waste management. And I understand Matt Bradford, the Head of Cleansing and Open Spaces, has a presentation to deliver to the panel on this subject. Matt, shall I hand over to you?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if I could share my screen, it's quite a short presentation. In fact, it's only one slide. So if I could share my screen with you. Are members of the panel able to see that screen
Yes,
there?
thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so what I've done for this meeting, Chair, is I've looked at the top 5 performing authorities in 2021-22, so that being the last full complete, 2021, that being the last full complete year that we've got records for, and look to see what their collection methods are, and the sort of their collection arrangement. So what I need to do is to develop this and provide further evidence. I think that will probably be to the next panel using an audit family of similar authorities to us, but I thought it'd be useful at this meeting to show what the top 5 performing authorities did and how they arranged their waste collection. So you have in front of you the top 5 English authorities for last year, and what this table tells us is that none of the authorities there yet are hitting the 65% recycling rate that is in the new resources and waste strategy that's required by 2035, although some are very, very close. So the top authority there is St Albans, over 64%, and they collect their waste in a commingled bin, but they have a separate bag for cardboard and paper. They do undertake weekly food waste collections, and they have a chargeable garden waste service, and the charge is £45 for that bin that's collected fortnightly. The next one is South Oxfordshire, at just under 64%, and the arrangements are very, very similar. They collect all of their recycling in one bin. They do have a weekly food waste collection, and they do have a chargeable garden waste service at £51.50. You'll see that South Oxfordshire and the Vale of Whitehorse are very similar in their performance and in their collection arrangements, and that is because they have some shared service. They're neighbouring authorities, and they share some elements of their service, it appears. So you'll see that the performance is similar, and they charge the same amount for their garden waste, and that is why. So you've got Three Rivers District Council there, again, weekly commingled service. So recycling collected every week in their recycling bin rather than every fortnight, which was a bit of an outlier really from the rest of the authorities that I looked at. They do food waste, and they have a chargeable garden waste bin at £45 for a year. We've already talked about Vale of Whitehorse, and then you've got Surrey Heath in 5th place. So they're over 60%, over 61% in fact. They collect recycling in a similar way to us, fortnightly in a commingled bin. They do have weekly food waste collections, and they do have a chargeable garden waste service. Now, I couldn't determine the charge of their garden waste service because their service is suspended due to HGV driver shortages, and it's been suspended for some time. So they aren't offering up the option to join at the moment for that service. So I guess things that might seem obvious to panel members is the first thing is that all of those authorities collect food waste on a weekly basis. An interesting thing that I noticed is that they all have some sort of commingling or mixing of recycling, whereas the government push really is for more separation. It's quite interesting that the high performers really don't follow the policy that's been put out nationally. And the thing that really surprised me was that I assumed that each of these higher performing authorities would have a free garden waste service, and none of them did. About 45% of local authorities charge for their garden waste collections. And I say, being the higher performers, I thought that they would have a free service, but they all charged. And they all charged probably around what I would consider the median for garden waste charges. It was probably about 40 to 50 pounds, some slightly above on that. Charges tend to go from sort of 15 or 20 pounds at the low end to in excess of 90 pounds at the higher end. So something to consider there. I think the next task is we've done some comparators across Leicestershire at the last meeting. I think what we need to do going forward is to get an audit family together of similar authorities to us and benchmark those, and I could do a similar task for that for the next meeting. But I'm happy to take any questions on that.
Okay, Councillor Forrest has her hand up. Councillor Forrest, would you like to ask your question? Councillor Forrest, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Right, thank you. First of all, I'd like to say I thought it was an excellent presentation from Matt. I thought it was fascinating. One or two points, I'll go through them quickly. I think it's significant that they all have food waste collections. I think it's something for us to look to. I see that the Three Rivers District Council collect recycling collection weekly, and I don't know if Matt would know, but how big a district then is Three Rivers? I mean, I take it it's smaller than Charnwood Borough Council.
I'm not sure, Councillor Forrest, if I'm honest, and there's different ways to judge this by size. So size can be considered in terms of population or by area.
Yeah.
So I've worked in a local authority that's quite large but has quite small population, so it's quite sparsely populated, and that affects what you do. But I'm not sure. I'd have to look into that, if I'm honest. Interestingly, they collected recycling weekly, but they did residual waste fortnightly. So it wasn't a weekly collection of both. It was almost as if they were saying the recycling's more important than the residual waste, so we'll collect it more often.
That's interesting. Just as a personal user of the service, I think that Charnwood's garden waste collection service is excellent and represents really good value for money. So I don't think we need worry there. But Matt, you may not be able to answer this question because, and it's not meant as a criticism, because these are all so different. Could you put your finger on what stops Charnwood from achieving these figures that these other five attain?
I could try. I think there are multiple different factors. I think the first one you've already hit on, Councillor Forrest, is the fact that they all do food waste collection, and that's said to be about 40% of the weight of a residual waste bin. So that's a lot of weight coming out the bin if people participate in that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that these all sound to me like they're quite affluent, leafy districts, potentially a different housing mix to Charnwood, where you might have a lot of larger properties with big gardens, perhaps. So their take up and use of the garden waste service might be better than ours. I've worked in an authority where we got 61% recycling rate, so we were quite close to the target there. at that time we did do food waste, and we did have a garden waste collection. But when you broke it down and you looked at the components, we didn't actually do that well on dry recycling where I worked before. In comparison to other authorities, a lot of the weight of what we collected was garden waste, and I would say that was because it was one of those districts, perhaps with a different housing makeup to the one that we've got, and a lot of take up of the garden waste scheme. A lot of properties with large gardens with multiple garden waste bins, and therefore a lot of the weight is made up there. So I think the demographics is an important factor to take into account, and we can't really change that. So I think it'll be a lot easier for some of these authorities to hit the 65% target than some others. So
yeah,
I think we're probably about in the middle. We're not super urban in a city, high density housing with small gardens, but we're not one of these very green affluent areas either. So we're probably somewhere in the middle.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Matt. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Howe has his hand up. Councillor Howe, do you want to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree, Matt. When I looked at them, I thought, well, they're wealthy, sort of rurally type areas, so they might have a lot of gardens, and if they do, that tilts the weight over. Also, I've got the advantage, I can look on my phone, that I don't think it's coincidence that St Albans and Three Rivers are next to each other as well. So we've basically got, on that out of 5, we've got 2 pairs. I mean, looking at this, presumably, if we did collect food waste, it would stop ordinary waste being contaminated. It would stop the contamination a bit. And would it cause a problem if we separated paper or card because of our lorries? And is there really any necessity to do that? Thank you.
Okay, through you, Chair. The separation of paper and card is largely it's a direction that the government is pushing, really. And the reason that they wanted to do that is because having glass mixed in with paper and card creates a processing problem at the paper mills, really. And the government want to make the recycling process easier, more efficient, more effective, to get more material in. So the paper mills ask or prefer for that to be separated, and that's why that happens. I guess the other question was about contamination of recycling. Councillor Howe, is that right? Whether separate food waste would alleviate that?
Yes, and whether, as I say, if we do separate it, whether it would cause us a problem with the structure of the lorries having 2 separate, or would we maybe consider doing one on one and one on another or something?
It would cause an issue with our current fleet configuration, because our recycling vehicles are single compartment vehicles, and you can buy vehicles that have split compartments, and you can have the capacity of the vehicle split in different ways. So I have worked in an authority where we did collect paper and card separately, and the vehicle was split 80% for general recycling and 20% of the capacity was for paper and card. So that could be an issue for us going forward if we chose to follow that particular collection method, depending on the point at which we chose to change. It's the cost of change, really, and that cost of change diminishes as your fleet gets older and you become closer to your fleet renewal point.
Thank you.
Okay, if nobody else has any questions, I have a couple, Matt, if that's okay.
Fire away, Chair.
Okay, so that was really interesting, but I felt like I wanted some more specific information to be able to kind of figure out sort of the specifics of those authorities compared to ours. I know you've compared sort of similar sized authorities, and you and Councillor Howe both said that you have a feeling that the demographics they're slightly more affluent authorities perhaps than Charnwood, but I think it would be interesting to drill down and actually find that out and get some figures if it was possible for kind of what percentage, or even if you can estimate what percentage you think of that recycling is made up of that weekly food waste collection. I know you said it could be up to 40% of the residual waste if it was taken out, but how do you calculate what percentage that ends up being of your collected recycling?
The figures that are available to me, I will confirm this after the meeting, the figures that are available to me they give the material that's sent for composting or anaerobic digestion combined. So it'll only give the food and the garden waste combined, I believe. So without speaking to each individual authority and getting the direct data directly from them, I wouldn't be able to look at the data that's readily available. I could speak to each authority individually and get that information.
Okay, what I'm trying to get at is what kind of percentage we could anticipate adding to our own recycling rates if we implemented food waste collections.
Right, okay. So it's not part of tonight's agenda, but we've been doing some high-level modelling with the Leicestershire, the other Leicestershire authorities to come up with a Leicestershire Waste and Resources strategy. And we've developed a draft, and that's out for consultation from the start of this week. And I think we'll discuss that at a future meeting, Chair. But that does look at, it does high-level modelling and predicts our performance if we adopted different models, and the adoption of food waste is one of those elements that's in there. In fact, I believe it's in all of the models, because the government has indicated quite strongly that it's going to mandate councils to collect separate food waste separately, and that's we haven't got an implementation date yet. It was set for 2023, but the industry feels that that's going to be pushed back maybe a year or two. So we could be mandated to collect food waste from a date to be determined in the near future. It could be 2024 or 2025. But the options appraisal for our collections does give those predictions on what we could expect to collect if we did certain things.
Okay, well, when we get further through this meeting, we can talk about what's going to be on the agenda for the next one. But I think, yes, it would be good if you could talk us through the draft strategy that's just been published. Okay, I think the other question I had was about the potential cost of implementing food waste collections. I know we've talked about this before, Matt, but I thought maybe this would be something that other members of the panel, it would be sort of valuable information for them to have as well, about the cost of implementing food waste collections, and also about if you have a vague idea of what the cost of implementing a trial would be.
Okay. The council was involved some years ago, probably 5 years ago now, in doing some modelling on food waste collections with the other Leicestershire authorities, and we did some cost analysis on that. And so it's quite old information now, and the modelling that we did at that time I didn't work for Charnwood at the time, but I know from past experience and having read the report, it looked at dropping residual waste collections to 3 weekly and collecting food waste on a weekly basis. So there was a saving in collecting residual waste less frequently and a cost of food waste. The net cost of doing that at the time was £715,000 a year. That was revenue, and then you've got the cost of providing 2 containers per household. So you have a kitchen caddy and an outside bucket, really, with a lid on. And you've got the cost of that, which is probably between £5 and £10 per household delivered. We've got about 80,000 households. So this is me. I mean, I wouldn't want anybody to really hold me to this because we haven't done the work in modelling, but food waste collection, I think, if we were introducing it, keeping our residual waste collection fortnightly, I think it would cost us in excess of £1 million a year.
Okay, that's what these authorities are doing though, isn't it? Fortnightly recycling collections and weekly food waste. It
is. And how some of these authorities may afford this, Chair, is by, I think we talked last time at the last meeting, it was a long time ago, people may not remember, but residual waste is the most expensive type of waste for the county council to dispose of. Okay. Food waste is probably a quarter of the price. The disposal cost is probably a quarter of the price of residual waste. So some of these authorities may have arrangements with their county council colleagues whereby the county council subsidises elements or part of the collections, making it more affordable. That may be through something called recycling credits, which we had in the past. But there may be some exchange of the benefits of collecting food waste between those two organisations. Fortunately, in Leicestershire, there isn't really a formal benefit sharing arrangement that exists. So as it stands, all of those costs would be borne by the Borough Council on its own. Now, moving on from that, the government have said that food waste collections are going to be made mandatory for collection authorities in the near future. As I say, the date's a little bit up in the air, but within the next 2 or 3 years, it will be mandatory for borough councils and district councils like us to collect food waste on a weekly basis. The government have said that they will fund any new commitment on the authorities. So taking that at face value, it means that all of the costs for the revenue costs for collection and the capital costs for the bins would be met by the government. I think what we'd like as an authority is some certainty that 100% of the costs would be met and some guarantees about the longevity of that funding. Because it's quite an expensive undertaking for us to start doing this if the funding is withdrawn after 3, 4, 5 years. And we're, as a borough council, left with a bill of £1 million a year to find when we're already struggling for finances and we've got savings to make.
Okay, I understand. Thank you, Matt. Perhaps I think we're going to come on to this a little bit further in the meeting as well, with an update on the conversation. We sent an invitation to Jane Hunt to attend the meeting and asked her about her involvement in sort of panels at government on waste and recycling, and I think she responded that she wasn't actually involved in any, but perhaps we could ask her to put those requests to government.
Yes, no, I think we've been in correspondence with the MP Jane Hunt to to really indicate what our concerns are given our current funding scenario, and what we'd like to see happen with the funding. So obviously funding in its entirety, and for some kind of guarantees for the longevity of that funding going into the future.
Okay. Councillor Baldwin would like to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to see as many people as possible compost their food waste, as I do. Now, obviously, not everybody is in a position to do that, but I wonder if it might be worthwhile having a push on providing composters for people, so that it would reduce the amount that goes to landfill.
Through you, Chair, that is something that we could do, Councillor Baldwin. I think the County Council does still have a food waste digester scheme. I'm not sure how well publicised it is, but they were running one up until quite recently. So we have done that in the past, and we can do that going forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Needham, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, so it's more of a follow-up on what Councillor Baldwin's just said, actually, and probably a bit of what Matt said, but I can distinctly remember, and I don't remember if it was us or County, and if it's still running, but for quite a few years there was an offer where you could get reduced rates for purchases of things like water butts and compost bins and things like that, because I actually used it myself, and like Councillor Baldwin, I compost all my food waste. So again, something like that would be good if it could be promoted, but again, that wouldn't necessarily help us with meeting those targets set by government, would it? Because that wouldn't be something that would come under us. Would I be correct in saying that, Matt, or would it help towards
no, it wouldn't help, actually. It would help. It would partly help because it would reduce the weight of the black bin, but the weight wouldn't go into another waste stream. So we wouldn't be able to count it as recycling if you're doing it at home, even though composting at home is probably the most sustainable thing that you can do with your food waste, or not having any food waste at all. Our performance would be less than it could be. So we'd get half of the benefits, but not the full benefits.
Yeah, it's quite disappointing that these targets don't take things like that into account, really, isn't it? Because actually it is the better thing to do in terms of the environment and recycling, but yet it wouldn't measure against any sort of success for us as a local authority.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think some of these targets don't really focus on the right things, and we should be focusing on using less, wasting less, recycling less. Recycling isn't the best thing to do. Recycling is the next best thing to do. The best thing to do isn't using that thing in the first place, not consuming that thing that you then need to recycle or put in the black bin. So it is a bit frustrating that we tend to focus on this particular performance indicator when there are better things for the environment that we could focus on.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we discussed this at the last meeting. It's also in the scoping document for this waste panel. I know one of the focuses was the fact that our recycling rate hasn't hit the target, but also we did discuss that, recycling isn't the be all and end all, and prevention is actually the real target. So I think that it's, that means that it's part of the reason we're here on this panel, and it's a shame if that waste doesn't help our recycling rates, but as long as it's being dealt with in a more sort of sustainable way, then I think that's still a positive thing as far as we're concerned. Does anybody else have any more questions or comments on this item?
Can I suggest, Chair, that we meet outside of the meeting and I can look to develop what we've done already and produce something more in line with your expectations?
It's not that it didn't meet my expectations, Matt. It's just that I'm trying to sort of, like everybody else, like Councillor Forrest was asking you to sort of pinpoint what it is that they're doing that we're not doing. And I think it's difficult to do that when you've got such a sort of high level view, but I'm not sure whether we're going to be able to access, you know, detailed information on sort of percentages of recycling in different streams. What I would like to see at the next meeting, which you've already said that you'll produce for us, is something like this, but for more local authorities that are in sort of our surrounding areas.
Yes, well, the presentation at the last meeting did give these details, similar details for the Leicestershire authorities. I think probably what we need to do is to benchmark against similar authorities that aren't necessarily our geographical neighbours.
Okay, yeah, that would be good. One more question before we move on from this. I was just wondering, because you said you were sort of surprised that only one of these authorities had a separate recycling stream for paper and card. Do we know if any of the lower performers have those separate waste streams? I thought it would be interesting to know.
No, I didn't look. I didn't look at the lower performers, but again, that's something that we can look at to see what arrangements are in place in other places. The lower performers tend to be your more inner city areas.
Right. Okay.
So again, there's quite a clear demographic if you look at them. But we can do that as well, and we can have a look at some authorities that are perhaps towards the lower end of the table and see how they manage their collections. But they do tend to be very urban inner city areas.
Okay. Yeah. So I think if everybody else is happy with this, for Matt to come back to the next meeting with some similar data for other authorities with sort of similar demographics to ours, for us to benchmark against. I think that would be good. I think something we need to look at in a future meeting as well is some of the barriers to recycling for different groups of people. And to sort of discuss what we can do to help people overcome those barriers. Because as you've said, in some of these areas, they're probably quite affluent. There's probably a lot of garden waste that makes up that recycling figure. What do we do to incentivise people to recycle more that don't have gardens and things, or live in flats?
Yeah. If I could say, Chair, I think that communal bin stores in flats and apartments is a challenge for every authority up and down the country. Really, yeah. where you have shared bins, and I think that's an area where we can focus on improving our arrangements.
I'm guessing we don't have a detailed breakdown of recycling rates by ward. I think I've asked you this before.
No, because our rounds aren't designed on ward boundaries. I could give you a recycling rate by round. I can tell you what streets are on that round. And then we could look at the higher and lower performing ones, but that would cut across a number of ward boundaries.
Okay, but I don't think the boundaries are so important as sort of looking at the makeup of those areas. I think that would be something that would be interesting for the panel to look at. Do other members have any views on that?
Can I just say something? Yeah. Is that okay? Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I didn't put my hand up.
That's fine, go ahead.
As I say, one of the things is that we haven't got a definition of what our waste looks like now in percentage terms. I mean, I agree with what we've been saying earlier, that, you know, one figure of, you know, 65%, it needs to be balanced. The more we compost, the worse the figure looks for us, whereas it's actually better. But as I say, it would be interesting to know if anyone's done any samples of bins just to show what percentage of each type of waste there is. Because it might be, if a lot of green waste, if we haven't got a lot of green waste or something, we couldn't hit 65% with the best will in the world. We don't actually know, we've got samples from our current bins really, have we, of what's in them. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Chair, if I could come back on that question. I think we did share a composition analysis at the last panel that was done some time ago. It wasn't up to date, but to undertake a full composition analysis is quite expensive. You have to obviously take a number of lorries from different rounds and put the waste on the floor and essentially pay someone to sift through it and categorise each item of waste, and that does run into many thousands of pounds. But we have got an indicative breakdown, and that was presented in the last set of slides at the last meeting, so it might be worth revisiting those.
Yes, it was, and you did say then, Matt, that to conduct another sort of survey is quite an undertaking. So I think we'll just have to go off that data, even though if it is a little bit outdated. But I think it would be really interesting to have a look at your collection round data to see where there are sort of discrepancies.
Yeah, I could have a look at producing that, Chair.
Okay.
So leave that with me, and I'll see what I can do for the next meeting.
Sorry to interrupt, Chair. Can I just, would that be part, I mean, one of the key tasks you get to do that you've just spoken about was looking at barriers. So would you want, when you schedule in that key task, is that an appropriate time for Matt to provide that information to you?
Yes, I think it would be, Laura, thank you. I think it would also be appropriate at that point to do some of the engagement that we also put into the scoping document with different residents groups to try and get, and tenants associations, to try and get some sort of feedback from residents themselves about what barriers they perceive themselves facing.
Thank you. Okay,
if nobody else has anything to say on this item, can we move on to item 7? So item 7 on the agenda is the new research, technology and methods that could help improve recycling rates. And at the last meeting, members of the panel were asked to submit suggestions to myself and Sally, and they are in the agenda on pages 9 to 11. So if you want to grab your agendas. Has everybody had a chance to have a look at the different proposals put forward? There's some interesting ones. Does anybody have any comments on them to start us off?
Would you like me to?
Yes, if you have some.
Talk about the first one. So nappies is quite an important one, really, because for some families it makes quite a large proportion of their non-recyclable waste. So I think Councillor Howe is quite right to pinpoint this as an issue. And it's also an issue because nappies, unfortunately, are one of the main contaminants in our recycling bins. I'm not sure why that is. I find it hard to believe that some people think that they can recycle their nappies through the recycling bin. If I'm honest, I think it happens because we've got an alternate weekly connection, and people want those nappies removed at the next available collection. So they'll put them in any bin. They'll put them in the next bin that's due to be emptied, basically. It's my view on that. I haven't done any scientific research, but that's where we go. So the County Council does have a nappy campaign that focuses on people using reusable nappies. I have used reusable nappies with my children, and they work quite well. So there is a campaign, and County Council waste officers do go to sort of mother and child groups, things like that, to try and promote the use of nappies, and we could get more involved in that. Also, to sort of develop that further, a number of Welsh authorities actually have a nappy collection, or a collection of absorbent hygiene products. So there is a processing plant in Wales that will actually recycle the materials from absorbent hygiene products, and a number of Welsh authorities do that. Now, I think one of the reasons that they do that is because a lot of the Welsh authorities collect residual waste on a 3-weekly basis and not a fortnightly basis. The Welsh government has a set model that it expects its councils to follow. But that is something that we could look at, and we could certainly get more involved in. It's something that County Council does, and if I'm honest, we don't get too involved in that, and we could do more in that area.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Howe has his hand up. Councillor Howe, would you like to respond?
Thank you. Yes, as I say, I came across this campaign when I was looking into it. Now, I'm not sure. I mean, I know that the only things I can find is that Oby and Wigston have got posters about it on their lorries, and that the County Council are putting something at waste sites. And apparently it's run by the County Council Waste and Policy Strategy team. So it might be interesting hearing from them what else they can offer, because Leicestershire County Council is one of only about, I think it's about 7 authorities in the country that are picked for this. So I just think it'd be worth finding out from them exactly what they can do for us.
Yeah,
what help they can give us.
Sorry, Chair, through you. We can
That's
certainly
okay. Thank you.
We can certainly have a conversation with them, and we have got, as Councillor Howe's pointed out, we have got vehicles with advertising panels on. We've got 21 vehicles driving around the district Monday to Friday. So we have got some advertising space. It isn't free. There's a cost of change of each of those panels that we could incorporate, but it's certainly something that we could look to get more involved in. I think
that's a really interesting idea, actually, Matt. Advertising on the side of the vehicles. I wonder as well, because I know that the County Council do that reusable nappy scheme, whether we can sort of tie in the comms or piggyback on their comms on that. I mean, I don't know how they advertise it, whether they do any outreach with nurseries or Sure Start centres or anything like that, if they go out into the community to try and sort of recruit parents.
Thanks, Chair. I think they did do a lot of outreach work, but obviously that probably hasn't happened for a couple of years now for obvious reasons. So they'll probably be looking to pick that up. And they did go to coffee mornings and parent and baby sessions and things like that. So we could look to get involved in that. The County Council does employ officers that are specifically there for waste minimisation. Obviously, they have got bigger budgets than us, and we haven't got that luxury. But we could piggyback on their campaigns and do something for not a lot of money, really, either on the lorries or through social media or something like that.
Okay, Councillor Howe, you've still got your hand up. Did you want to ask something else?
No, thank you. Sorry, I'll bring it.
Okay. Councillor Needham, you did have your hand up. Did you still have something you wanted to say?
Sorry, I was going to come in right from the beginning about reusable nappies, but over the course of the questions, everything that I was going to raise got covered. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, no problem. Matt, did you want to have a look at the next one, which is also from Councillor Howe?
Yes, if I can, Chair, that this is the bin with the perspex boxes on the top that tell people what goes where. I think it looks great, actually. Really good visual impact, no language barriers, easy for members of the community to understand. I do like it. Very little room for misunderstanding with that. I think that'd be great in key locations for street bins. Whether we could roll that out in our communal bin stores everywhere, I'm not sure, because there'll be a significant cost. But if we did something like that in the main town or village centres, Queen's Park, or other key locations, I think it would be good. We could look at the cost of doing that. I am looking at running a trial for compaction bins as part of our carbon pledge. So we're looking at doing a trial in the next financial year to put some solar bins in that they compact waste and require emptying less frequently, saving money and resources and journeys. So we are looking at that as well, probably to think about in tandem to this.
Are they similar to the bins that let you know when they're full? Yes,
that's exactly what they do, Chair. They have a SIM card in and they send you a text message when they're 90% full, so you can go and empty them rather than going on a circuit and emptying them every other day or once a week, depending on where it is and how busy it is and what the footfall is. These bins tell you when they're full and when they need emptying, so you can use your resources much more effectively. And there's a carbon saving there from the transport costs.
They sound like a great idea, and I really like these bins. Like you said, they are really sort of user-friendly and self-explanatory. I wonder whether it might be a recommendation that the panel could make, that we do a trial with one in, like you said, a key location. So I remember having a conversation with you a couple of years ago after a resident had contacted me. They'd watched one of our waste operatives emptying the recycling bins in the town centre and seen them putting all of the waste, recycling and non, into the same bag, and asked me why that was. And I remember asking you, and the reason was because the recycling waste was so heavily contaminated that there was just nothing we could do with it. So perhaps if bins are really clearly labelled, people have got to actually look at it and put the bin in the wrong place. It's an incentive to not do it.
We have to consider this, Chair, alongside the implementation of the deposit return scheme, because a lot of drinks containers will go back to retail outlets under that scheme, and I anticipate that we'll collect a lot less street rubbish, and I'm hoping there'll be a lot less littering from drinks cans and bottles and coffee cups, because those will then have a value that can be redeemed from the retailer.
Yes, let's hope so. Councillor Howe, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciated when I took the photos that the litter collected in our bins isn't appropriate for this committee. What I was just looking at was the visual display of what goes in what bin, I think, has an impact on people. I mean, I read the lists of what goes where and everything, but I just think that, not at this meeting, but if we had a display like that or something, if there's public event, that physically seeing what goes in each bin has far more impact than a sheet of paper. And that was the point I was making. I know the waste bins aren't appropriate to this, and if Charm would want to do that with waste bins where they won't get vandalised, it's a good idea. But it was just this idea that visually it has more impact than the sheet of paper with a list on. Thank you.
Yeah, I can remember going out and doing like a street stall with some of our open spaces and waste management team, and them sort of bringing examples of what kind of things can be recycled in Charnwood. And actually we're really lucky because there's a lot of things that you can put in your green bin here, like the film of the sort of ready meal containers and things that you can't recycle in other authorities. And I really don't think residents are aware. Okay. So the next one, I think, is also Councillor Howe's suggestion, which is about publicity. So yeah, I think comms, is that what you were getting at, Councillor Howe?
Yeah, would you like me to come in? Yeah. Would you like me to come in there, Chair, if I can? I think comms is really important, as Councillor Howe has said, and we don't want to be. I said earlier that reducing the amount of material and packaging that we use is key. We don't want to be producing bits of paper and booklets and pamphlets unnecessarily. I think it is necessary for some residents, but not others. So I think we really need to think about messages, getting key messages across, and the method of how we do that with people in order that we don't put our own waste into the borough, really. But we need to get key messages across, make people aware of what they can and can't recycle, how to use the scheme. And we need to really look at those, I think they're called nudge messages, those little bits of encouragement for people, for them to recycle, really, and look at the psychology of it all. Because I think the psychology has quite a big element to play in this, really, and on how we get people to recycle that perhaps aren't that motivated by environmental issues.
Yeah, I think what you were saying earlier about advertising on the side of lorries, I know you said there was a cost to producing the sort of stickers that would do that, but I think using the means that we've got as well is really important. So it's not just a case of producing flyers and leaflets and stickers and things, but I know not everybody uses social media, but we've got Facebook, we've got Twitter, we've got YouTube. I think even producing sort of videos, getting the mayor to go through his bin or something and sort of pick out what's recyclable and what's not, things like this, and sort of going out with a team to sort of, I don't know, supermarket car parks and things to sort of help sort of explain to people what from their shopping can end up in the recycling bin and what can't. Just trying to sort of think a little bit more sort of outside of the box with it, trying to sort of capture people's sort of sense of fun a little bit, and maybe even, people are better with carrots than sticks. So how can we incentivize people to do it? Can we set up a sort of a borough-wide competition for the family that recycles the most, or rather than recycles the most, increases their recycling the most and decreases their residual recycling the most? I think comms is really important, and my recommendation, I don't know what the rest of the panel thinks, is that we really need to actually commit some resources in terms of manpower and a little bit of funding towards putting together a really good strategy around increasing our recycling rate and reducing our residual waste.
Thanks, Chair. We do get as part of the contract with Serco, we get £10,000 a year for comms messages that we can utilise for these things. Now, some of that money could be used for refreshing the messages on the side of the vehicles, or doing other things that you've talked about there. So there is a small budget available already in terms of money, and then we can commit some resource from my team to doing things that wouldn't be on a full-time basis, but we could ask some of my officers to do some exercises. We do go into schools and scout guide groups and things like that when we've been able to, but obviously that hasn't happened recently. On videos, we are using them more. I'm actually doing a video tomorrow, which I'm dreading, to be honest, about street cleansing on the A6 and A46 and what really we need to do there. So yeah, I await the BAFTA nomination and we'll see how that goes. So we are looking at these things. If I'm honest, for the last couple of years, we have been in kind of business continuity mode, if you like. We have had quite a few challenges. We haven't known from day to day whether we'll be able to complete the collections, whether we'll have enough drivers or operatives turn up, and it has been a bit day to day. But now, hopefully, we'll be able to do some longer term thinking and start being more proactive with the comms and getting these messages out.
Yes, I appreciate the last couple of years, as I'm sure does everybody, have been very challenging for your team in particular. And, you know, our waste operatives with Serco have worked incredibly hard over the last couple of years. But, you know, we can start looking forward now to how we can sort of improve things. And I'm glad to see that you're leading by example. The videos, look forward to watching that tomorrow, Matt. Yeah, and schools is really important, I think, because I can only sort of speak for my own children's school. I don't think they do an awful lot of recycling. And I know your team haven't been able to go into schools over the last couple of years, but setting up a sort of borough-wide school recycling challenge, I think, would be a really interesting idea. And I'm sure they were looking at doing something like this before the pandemic hit, because kids are very competitive, and it's kids that we need to understand how important this is. So I'd really like to see something like that happen.
Yeah, the children, obviously, the children are quite motivated by this. And I think sometimes they can make the parents feel a little bit guilty if they're not doing the right thing, and it can stimulate better behaviour, better recycling behaviour in the parents. So that's something that we can look at, and it's one of those little nudges that I talked about earlier. If we do school, if we do some competitions with school or some awareness with schools, to really engage the children at quite a young age. I think when they get to teenagers, they're not as excited by it. It's quite difficult. You have to get them quite young. Something that one council did, and I think they might have funded it with a small incentive, but they challenged 10 families to produce zero residual waste for a year. And I think there was a cash incentive for them to do it, ran a little competition, and did it in tandem with a local newspaper and did monthly updates on how they were getting on, which I thought was quite good. And really that zero waste, zero residual waste message is really where we need to get people to be, really.
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting idea as well. Yeah, so I think let's look at developing the comms strategy a little bit. Okay, the next one on the list is one I submitted, which was scrap stores or library of things. I'm guessing, does everybody on the panel know what those are? Yeah, okay. Matt, your thoughts on that?
I think they're great ideas. Obviously, scrap stores, if you've got something residual that's left over that you don't need, that you don't want clutter in your house, if you could take that to a central point for someone else to use rather than put it in the residual waste, that is really good. Fantastic. I think we'd need to partner with a sort of social enterprise or a local voluntary sector group to look into that. The Library of Things is something that I like, where you can borrow items that you rarely use, and take them back. So, you know, hedge cutters or sewing machines or small electrical items that you need for a set period of time, and you can return them for someone else to use, and people can avoid the cost of purchasing them. I think is a really, really good idea, and I've seen that set up in a couple of places that works quite well. I think we all buy things that we use once or twice a year, and we have to store them, keep them. They clutter the house, and because they're not used very frequently, they're often getting to a state of disrepair as well. Whereas if we had somewhere where you could go and just, you know, borrow these items for a few days, take them back, I think it would be fantastic. For not just from a waste point of view, but from a cost point of view. I say some people haven't really got the means to purchase these items, so it'd be making them available for people that maybe couldn't afford them.
So how do we sort of move on from here? I mean, is it worth approaching groups like Transitions? I know they've sort of toyed with the idea of setting up a Library of Things in the past, or even Men and Women in Sheds. It might be something that they could support.
Yeah, I think those are two groups that we could approach, and we could encourage them to apply for a council grant to set them up with a few frequently used items, and then get them up and running. Obviously, with electrical items, there does need to be a little bit of know-how there if we're lending electrical items to people. But I'm sure there's something that we could do, or that we could explore and see if we can get something off the ground.
Okay. Are you happy for me to sort of approach them and ask them if they'd be prepared to have a conversation about it? Definitely.
Absolutely. I did wonder, Chair, whether John Storer House would be a good one. They have got the community shop now, and I did wonder whether it could be associated with that, because that has opening hours, it's got staff. Whether it could be an extension of that community shop. I understand that that's working really well. And it would target those people that perhaps haven't got the means to buy these pieces of equipment to start with, but we'd look to extend it to people that perhaps didn't want to purchase it because they just didn't, you know, it's wasteful buying these things when you use them very infrequently.
Yeah, it might be something that could be combined also with some workshops on basic DIY skills as well, to sort of train people in how to use those tools properly. Councillor Forrest, do you have your hand up?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm a trustee at John Storer House. I would be happy to raise this subject with them. I'm sure they would want to help. Would say at the outset, one of the problems there may be storage space, may have the space to do it, but I will certainly raise the issue because I think it's an excellent idea and we can see what we can come up with. And I'm also very keen on the idea of having, you see it on the television, a repair shop. It's very difficult to, I've got a toaster. It's four. Two of them work, the other two don't. Where do I take that to have it repaired? Because I don't want to put it in the bin because I'm sure it could be repaired, but I don't know where it goes. And I think that's the sort of thing we also ought to think about. There must be lots of people who have small items that would take half an hour to repair. There's nowhere to take them. But anyway, thank you. I will take it up with John Storehouse.
Thank you, Councillor Forrest. Actually, there was somewhere you could have taken it, but unfortunately, because of the pandemic, it's not happened for a long time. Fearon Hall used to host regular repair cafes run by Transitions, and they had a number of repairers that could repair small electrical items, bikes, pieces of clothing. My dad was a repairer with them for a bit, but I wouldn't let him anywhere near your toaster, to be frank. But yeah, we really ought to be supporting those kind of organisations to restart those kind of activities. Councillor Needham.
So yeah, absolutely perfect timing with that, Councillor Forrest, because I was actually going to say that based in Leicester City until the pandemic, there was a very similar group that did that. So they would take primarily electrical items to either reuse completely. So, you know, people who knew about that type of thing would take them apart and build them into something new if needed, or help people learn the skills to fix things themselves or fix things for them. But I was just going to suggest, Chair, that they might be a group that we might want to speak to, just to see how that worked in practice. So if you wanted me to pass you the details of the group or someone I know who was involved in it, would that be useful?
That would be great, Councillor Needham. Is it Leicester Fixers?
It was Leicester Hack Space. They may be different groups, they may just have different names.
Yeah, I think they might be the same one, and I think they actually did get some funding to support the repair cafes at Fearon Hall at some point before all of the pandemic happened. So yeah, I think it would be interesting to get in touch with them as well. Thank you.
Chair, could I just interject for a moment, just while we're speaking about all these ideas, just to be clear that these people going off and investigating, it is investigatory at this stage, because obviously it's something that you would then be looking to recommend through the scrutiny panel process onto scrutiny commission, rather than sort of steaming ahead with the ideas. Just that cautionary note, really. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Yes, at this point, I think it's just sort of putting a toe in the water and gauging if groups would be interested.
Obviously, you need to have the information to make the recommendations. Yeah.
Then, of course, we can pass on any recommendations that come out of it. Thank you. Okay, the next one I think is also one of mine, and it was about items that we don't currently collect in the household recycling, like small electrical items, nearly new paint, things like crisp packets, toothbrushes, the things that a company called TerraCycle will recycle. So I was just wondering about, and I also put something in there about repair cafes, I see, now I'm looking at it. But yeah, about how we can, is there scope to collect small electricals at the household recycling sites, or nearly new paint, because we do have an Exario sort of paint shop on the Belton Road estate, and they will sell you nearly new paint at very good price for a charity, but there's nowhere in Charnwood for you to actually donate that paint. You can't donate it directly to them. So I can't remember where the nearest donation point is. Is it Whetstone or somewhere? Which is quite far away. So I just wondered about capacity to do that. And also, would it be possible to establish a recycling point at one of the waste sites for those more difficult to recycle but still possible to recycle things, like crisp packets and toothpaste packets and printer cartridges, and the batteries, which we stopped recycling. Councillor Harper-Davies has just clarified that it's Hamilton for donating paint, which is quite a distance for Charnwood residents. Matt, can you comment on that?
Yeah, I think paint's a long-standing issue for residents that I've raised with the County Council on a few occasions. It is classed as hazardous waste because of its contents, and it requires special storage arrangements, which is why they only do it at 2 of the household waste sites. across the county. I think it is Hamilton and Whetstone from memory, but it is a source of frustration for residents that they have to drive so far to dispose of it. I've been asking the question for at least 10 years as to whether we can have more, but I will raise it again to see if we can get some sites there. I think the sites that do take paint, the household waste sites that county run, I think they do offer it for reuse, some of it. So there we go. You can take small electrical items to the household waste sites. And I am looking at, as part of the draft waste strategy, we're looking at whether we could extend our recycling service to reincorporate batteries, small electricals, and textiles. So that is one of the things that's contained within the draft waste strategy. So we're looking at that. So crisp packets and toothbrushes is a difficult one, really, to collect as part of our sort of curbside collection system. But again, I think it'd be good to see if we could arrange something with the county council at their household waste sites to see if they could do that. These items under the National Waste and Resources Strategy should become easier to recycle. Toothbrushes maybe not, but crisp packets are, we talked about them before, they're composite materials, there's metal, plastic, plastic film there, and once they're bonded together, you can't separate them. They'll be penalised under the Extended Producer Responsibility scheme for putting hard to recycle materials on the market. So they may well become easier to recycle. So if they were just film without the foil, they could go in our normal recycling bin, and that I think is where we'd like to get to. But certainly in the short term, we could ask the county to look at TerraCycle items there to see what we could do.
Is that something we would need to sort of put forward as a recommendation, Laura, or do we just ask Matt to do that directly?
I think, Chair, that anything the panel comes up with that thinks would improve matters should be included as part of your recommendations when you come to put together your report.
Okay, what are other members?
Matt will know from an operational point of view whether that's something he was.
I could make some tentative inquiries at this point, I think, and we'll see. We can find out what the viability is like and whether we get a warm reception or not. But if we want to do it formally in the way that Laura suggested, then we can. But I'll sound people out, I think, on that one.
Okay, if you want to make some sort of tentative approaches and see what response you get, and then perhaps further down the line, the panel can make it a formal recommendation as well. Okay, the next one on the list is from Councillor Baldwin about package-free shops. So council should promote, back or highlight package-free shops that sell products that are compostable, recyclable and reusable.
I was thinking more along the lines of, we have lots of empty shops, and I wondered whether we could approach perhaps a social enterprise or similar that would be willing to try opening a shop that would be exactly that, you know, which would sell products that are compostable, recyclable and reusable.
I think we already have one.
Do we?
Yes, we do. I think it was in the Carillon Court precinct. I know it's moved. I can't remember where it's moved to. Councillor Needham, do you know?
Yeah, but I can't remember the name of the street, I'm afraid. It's a little bit further out of town, near where the bingo used to be. But
it's on Baxtergate. Yeah,
right.
It's on Baxtergate, yeah.
Okay. In which case,
we should promote it.
I think as
Indeed.
well, Chair, they've also opened something on the Sense College near Loughborough College as a sort of satellite store as well.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
perhaps that could be part of the comms approach, and the same also for the audio app. That's more really for comms and letting people know what's out there.
Yeah.
We have. If we could just address Councillor Bouldring's point, Chair, if that's okay. We have looked at the Olio app before and considered promoting that. We have an enforcement role as a council for food hygiene.
Right.
And looking at it collectively and discussing it with colleagues, we felt that there was perhaps a conflict between promoting the Olio app and maybe our food hygiene enforcement action, really, because the Olio app, for those people that don't know what it is, it's a food sharing app, basically, where you can share leftover food or something, half a packet of something that you don't want that's still in date. You can put it on the app and someone can have it for free. Or if you've done some baking and you've baked too much, then you can put the produce on the app and someone else takes it off you. Now, technically, if you're sharing that food with someone outside your household, you need food hygiene course and things like that. And there's nothing to say what's contained within the ingredients. It's a bit of a minefield, really. So
Okay.
we did look quite closely at it, but we decided not to take that option.
Okay.
Councillor Needham's just sort of pinged a message across about other similar apps that perhaps don't have the same concerns, like Too Good To Go, which is food from supermarkets. So it's a lot of it's packaged food, or it's food that's just reached its sort of sell-by date. So there aren't similar concerns, really. That's something we could promote. And also sites like FreeCycle, Freegal, Pre-Loved, all those sites where you can sort of donate your old things and get something else that somebody else doesn't want. I think they're all things that we could promote. It doesn't, we don't have any responsibility then over sort of seeing these as projects. We're just sharing the information.
Yeah, that sounds fine. I think Freegal's I use Freegal myself, so that's quite a good app to use for people. I tend to be giving things away rather than acquiring them, though. So maybe I need to have a look at that. But it's very good, quite easy to use, actually. So
and often, for things like furniture, it's really difficult to get rid of it because charity shops can only take things like sofas if they've got the original fire retardant labels and everything on. So, and promoting those kind of websites could always also reduce the number of people that need to access the bulky waste collections, for example. Going back to Councillor Bouldring's point about packaging free shops, I wanted to ask about the market and what we could do to encourage market traders to go plastic free. I know I haven't seen it, but I'm pretty sure that the markets department have been looking at ways to reduce plastic in the markets. Do you know anything about that, Matt?
I don't, unfortunately, Chair. I'll have to look into that. But I have, pre-pandemic, I did meet with someone from Surfers Against Sewage that are looking at plastic-free towns, and they had some ideas. It may be worth recontacting them, and they look at the whole sort of retail offering in the town, trying to get retailers to remove plastic or minimise their use of plastic in their retail sales. So we can look at that.
Do we have a plastic-free town? Which one is it? I'm sure one of the villages is plastic-free. I can't remember if it's Rothley or one of the other villages. I'll have to look into it. But yeah, perhaps Sylvia Wright could shed some light on that one. Right, next one on the list, I think, is from Councillor Baldwin again about food waste recycling.
I'm not sure this one's actually for us, to be honest, but perhaps Matt can guide us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with the food waste, what we'd look to do is take the food waste and take it to an anaerobic digester, which is it recycles the food into a compost-like material that we use, but there's energy generation there that we could use as part of our carbon offsetting. So the environmental benefits of doing that with the energy generation are probably more beneficial than the method that's suggested there, I would think.
Okay.
Okay. And Councillor Baldwin's last point was about publicity and suggestions from the public.
I think we've already tied that in with Councillor Howe's proposal for publicity.
Yeah, we have discussed comms and publicity quite a lot, and also we've talked about public engagement with residents, tenants associations about barriers and, you know, what they think would help people recycle more. So and the last point is from Councillor Parton, again about education and publicity in terms of recycling, particularly in student areas. I know we had some problems, and Councillor Forrest is a councillor in an area with a high student density. I know we had some problems, particularly last year, and I know you did have some comms planned around that when the sort of student exodus happens. Matt, have you got any sort of anything further you want to add?
Yeah, we work quite closely with the university at the start of term under normal circumstances. I'd say it's been difficult in the last 2 years again, but we attend the Freshers' Fair and give them materials that they can take away and read on what goes in which bin, how to recycle, wash your recycling, giving out those key messages. I think that it's quite difficult for students. They come away from home for the first time and get bombarded with messages from the police about staying safe, the council about waste and recycling, the university about how to be a good student and get good grades. And it is a bit of information overload all at once. And I think we need to look at that, but we do actively try and participate with that. The end of term, end of summer term, end of academic year clear up is always a big challenge for us, as you would expect. Students don't all leave the university at the same time. So we try and do that student clear up of household items at the end of term, and to take their household items away. Some people do try and put bulky items out for collection that we won't collect, and that obviously causes non-student residents and other student residents that stay all year round some difficulties, and it makes areas look unsightly. So we are pulling together a plan for this year's student end of academic year arrangements, with a comms plan, some arrangements to collect their recycling, and then what enforcement action we'll take if the guidelines aren't followed. We're pulling together a plan that I'm hoping will be ready in the next month or so. We're working with the university, working with the environmental enforcement team, with comms, and I'm hopeful that we'll have a better result than last time. If I'm honest, I think it's really challenging. It's hard to get it 100% right, but we will we make every effort to make it as easy as possible for the students and the landlords really at the end of term. But there are a number of residual issues that we have to deal with through enforcement every year, and I think that will be the case going forward, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forrest.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Matt. Yes, I'm not going to demonise students. In houses, HMOs, you can have up to 6 students in this one house. They're all producing waste, and very often the bins are overflowing because there are too many students trying to use the same bin, and perhaps in some cases they need bigger bins. Also, they do need educating about what goes in what bin, because I've walked down streets in my student area and all the waste is mixed up together. There's green waste in the black bin, there's black waste in the green bin, and it's infuriating. And it does need a lot of education. But the problem is these are second year students, but it's the first time probably that they have been householders, because waste and emptying the dustbins and putting things in the dustbins is what has been done by their parents. It's what parents do, it's not what they do. So I think that in the student area, it just needs a lot more information to try and keep on top of it all. And as for stuff left out on the street, bulky waste, what most often happens is that it's the local councillors who get it reported to, and we just email it into Cleaner, Greener, Charnwood, and it's dealt with. I don't think there are any easy solutions. But if you are doing this plan, Matt and I, could you include the local councillors in it? Not necessarily, so the local councillors are prepared for, so they know what's going to happen, so they can pass this on to ward residents and students and anybody.
I think that's the whole purpose of doing it, Councillor Forrest, actually. So you have a clear idea of what comms we're doing, what collections we're making, and when, what collections we're not making, and are someone else's responsibility. And at the end of that, if we've got problems that we need to deal with, what enforcement action we can legally take and how we'll take it. And the whole purpose of the plan is to give that to councillors so that they know and they're better prepared when they get the questions from residents who quite rightly don't want to live in a street where the contents of a house have been turfed out and left on the pavement. I can understand how infuriating that would be for people, and we want to minimise that. We are trying to work with the landlords as well and put some responsibility on them, and hopefully we'll have a good June, and there won't be too many problems. Whether there'll ever be no problems, I'm not sure. It's a big task, but we will deal with it, and we'll take enforcement action where we need to.
Thank you very much, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. If nobody has anything else to add on this part of the panel meeting, can I suggest that we ask Matt to sort of go away and sort of approach the people that he's offered to approach, and come back next time and update us on how he's got on those various items. Laura's obviously been furiously taking minutes throughout, so she can recap if necessary what those actions were. Okay, is everyone happy with that? Okay, so on to item 8 then, which is further panel meetings and key task planning. So it might be a good time to have a look at the scoping document and see what remains on here, Matt.
If I could just add, Chair, we mentioned earlier that the the waste and resources draft waste and resources strategy for Leicestershire is out for consultation at the moment, and I have done a slide that some slides that I can share with panel members.
What now?
I could email it to them. It'll take some time to go through. So what I thought might be better is to email it to them for discussion at the next meeting.
I think that would be the best option.
You had actually got that programmed for you. I know we're sort of a meeting behind, aren't we now? But you have got that programmed for your next meeting. So I know that they're coming out in advance, Matt, before the meeting. Is that all right?
Yeah. So
that's ideal, I think, because if you can send the panel members the slides before the next meeting, they get a chance to have a look at your presentation. And I did also circulate draft strategy documents that you sent me earlier in the week. So
yeah. So I would say for members to look at the I've got to remember the numbers now. 11 pledges. There are 11 pledges, sort of commitments within the strategy that if it's adopted, we'll all sign up to. And probably the most pertinent thing for us is to look at the collection options appraisal, and that looks at how we collect waste and what the expected performance of each option is, what the carbon footprint is, what the public acceptability is, looks at it from a different dynamics and comes up with some suggestions of how we might do that. So that is probably the most pertinent part for us, the collection options appraisal, I would say. And that looks at things like introducing food waste. What it would get. Interestingly, there's 9 collection options modelled, high level modelling being done, nine different collection models done. None of them actually get us to 65%. Some get us very, very close. So we'll have to look at that and see. But I'll share the slides, and there's some links in there. And I think if we could have a good look at that before the next meeting, and then perhaps as a panel, it would be ideal, maybe worth making a written submission to the consultation on the strategy.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. That's what we're here for, after all. Okay, so we have that on the agenda for the next meeting. We also said that you were going to do some benchmarking for us against other similar councils so that we can have a look at that. Laura?
So I was going to say, Chair, so I think both main items you've considered tonight, you've decided should come back again to the next meeting. The first for the extra information from the audit. From the audit family, I can't remember now, Matt. And then also you want to have a look again when people have been away and looked at further some of the suggestions tonight, some feedback on those. So that's 3 items you've got for the next meeting. So probably then you're in a position after that. That's quite a large agenda, I would suggest. So probably after that, look at what remaining key tasks you've got. I've picked up some other things tonight in terms of wanting to do some discussions with, I think it was users of the service in certain areas. So
yeah, I think that's probably going to be something that we do. But how many meetings have we got programmed?
Well, yeah, I mean the other thing I was going to suggest was, because we missed them, you've got 2 more meetings programmed, one in March and one in April. Originally, the April meeting was to agree your final report, but I would suggest that you perhaps have another meeting at the end of that run, so that you've just scheduled in something extra to make up for the meeting we missed in December, because I think you're going to struggle to get everything that you've got listed down to look at in time for that.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we only had 2 meetings left, and the next one is made up of all of that content that we've just discussed, and the last one is supposed to be for us to discuss the recommendations we put forward, we're going to miss out one of the most important things, which is engaging with
Yes.
residents and other groups like Serco, who we haven't spoken to yet. I mean, they're on the ground. It would be useful to get their input as well. So I think we might have to add on a 5th meeting that we use for preparing recommendations. Is the rest of the panel in agreement with that suggestion?
So I would look to do that sometime in May, so that because you have them every 5 or 6 weeks or so to give people time in between. So I would say that there's plenty scheduled for the meeting in March. I wonder if perhaps I can meet with the chair outside of the meeting and look at the remaining key tasks and see if we can get those provisionally scheduled into the remaining meetings, so that the panel can have a look at that next time and perhaps adjust it and add in what you do and don't want to do.
That's fine by me.
Hopefully then you've covered everything that's in the scope document.
Yeah, one of the things that's in there that we could do outside of these meetings is a visit to the case pack processing site.
I think that's been
that is
Have you been working on that?
Yeah,
excellent.
That they've it's probably not a good time to visit at Christmas normally, and they have had some operational difficulties with the things that everyone else is struggling with as well over the last few months. I think they've also been taken over. So now that's all out of the way, I think we'll look to arrange that, and it's quite fascinating if you haven't been there before. So if you can make it, it's worth a visit. I've been quite a few times, so I've seen it all now. But it is worth a visit once I've got a date. If you can spare a little bit of time, it's worth going just to see what happens and learn how it all works.
Okay, well, perhaps you can come back to us with some potential dates.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the next meeting then, we've agreed on Matt presenting about the draft waste strategy, going back to that benchmarking against other similar councils, and feedback from the item 7 suggestions that we were looking at. Is everyone okay with that as a draft agenda? Okay, Laura?
You probably already got this in hand, Chair, but while I remember, could I just ask if we could just update on the invite that was to to Jane Hunt MP?
Yes, would you like to do that for us?
Yeah, the position was at the first meeting, the panel were told that Jane Hunt was on a government waste management panel, and they wanted to invite her along to a future meeting. I think regarding the environment bill and the concerns they had, particularly in relation to cost to the council. But I did invite Jane, but she did say that she wasn't a member of any such panel. So it was really to ask this panel if it was still something, with that new information in mind, if it was still something that the panel wanted to do. Jane was really willing to come along if she could help and could attend the meeting. But I just wanted to get a steer really from the panel as to whether they still wanted to do that.
Okay, thank you. Laura, thoughts? Anybody? Councillor Needham.
I think probably, I feel a bit like our MPs are probably the best people to take our concerns to government. You know, they seem to be the best conduit, really. So I'd probably still be in favour of inviting either Jane Hunt and or Ed Argar to, engage with us on this, unless there's someone more suitable in government that we could speak to. But it feels like our MPs are our sort of advocates there. So I'd still be in favour of inviting either of the MPs. Okay,
I don't disagree with that. However, I wonder, considering how full our agendas are for the upcoming remaining meetings that we've got, whether we might want to do that engagement via sort of a group sort of submission to them both, laying out exactly which points we would like them to labour with government on our behalf, rather than inviting them to a meeting, because I just have a feeling that if we invite them to a meeting, it would probably be really interesting and productive, but it will take up valuable time that this panel doesn't have, which we could have the same effect by giving them a written submission, maybe. What does everybody else think?
Yeah, I'd be happy with that as well. I just think if we can get the message to them in either way, that would be fine. So
yeah, I definitely think we need to pass on, you know, those concerns that Matt's raised and that we all have. But I think that might be the most efficient way to do it.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So in that case, if everyone's happy with those decisions we've made this evening, then I think we can note the further scheduled meetings of the panel. Can you remind me when they are, Laura?
It is the 15th of March, I think, is the next meeting. Let me double check for you. The 15th of March, and then we've got one in in April, which is the 26th. That was the one that was due to be our final meeting, but I think, as we've discussed, I'll try and get another meeting scheduled in May, and that would be the final meeting, hopefully, seeing how things go.
That's great. Okay, so the next scheduled meeting then is on the 15th of March. So thank you to everyone for attending this evening. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, councillors.